Thanks for coming. It's great to see you all. So it's familiar faces and happy faces and a few frowns. That's okay. Well, welcome. And where's Michael Bordeaux? Thank you, Michael. Where's John Cochran? Thank you, John. Marie Christine, where are you? Thank you so much for all the work you've done to put this together. It's been a wonderful thing. And thanks for the Hoover staff, just terrific. Good work. So we have a bit of a theme of this. You can see the title. That's the title. But the title has a bit of a theme to it. And let me just begin with the theme. Yes, sorry, that's the, that's the title again. Sorry about that. But the theme is, for this conference, is getting global monetary policy on track. Global, don't forget that. We'll be having a lot of global stuff going on. It also follows last year's theme, which was called Getting Monetary Policy on Track. And don't forget the theme before that year, how monetary policy got behind the curve. This year, the key issues are international for sure, with the special discussions of Europe and Asia, which we'll be discussing. And in fact, I think I would emphasize in these brief remarks that the key policy issues are international. And Hoover has had, that's why I'm wearing my Hoover tie, Hoover had policy conferences before, and you can read about them. We have a 15-year summary milestone of economic policy working group meetings. So it's been a real thrill to be part of this whole operation, and I'm glad you're here to participate in this. So what I would like to do, first of all, I want to thank people like Condoleezza Rice, who will be here tomorrow talking about various things. We have talks on Europe, global emerging markets, financial regulation and monetary policy. We have a luncheon address on micro, not macro, by Hester Pierce. And then tomorrow, we're also going to be discussing employment dynamics, labor markets, Phillips curve, and inflation, the next strategy review, and dare I say, a policy panel with Yamir Aran, Austin Goolsbee, and John Williams, fighting it out about the world economy. And we're going to conclude with some nice, sensible remarks by Ed Nelson. You're going to have to be sensible. But let me start with table one. And here I guess I must mention my good friend and former colleague, President John Williams. He just wrote last November, referring to the first paper on the list, saying, "One development that I think is important in ways that connects a number of changes, and that is the birth of the famous Taylor Rule. And the Taylor Rule transformed policy research. The idea was simple. It had been around for a while, but I think it transformed because it changed the language of talking about monetary policy. Who should know? Right, John? So thank you so much. One of the things which I want to mention as I go through these charts, I think this first thing will help. This is a chart which the Federal Reserve has published and put out. It's got various rules on it. It's got the Taylor rules listed first. Balance, they're all the same. And I'm sorry I said that. They're not all the same. But the first one's Taylor 93. That's ridiculous. It's got various things in it. And one thing that's important to list, and now I'll see if I can do that with the next slide. If you look at this, is really where the interest rate has gone. It's really amazing, quite frankly. 2 years ago, 0.75, 0.25. Now it's between 5.25 and 5.5 in a short period of time. Whether they did a good job or a bad job is for you to determine. I think it was a good job. It was recovering from a period which was not so great at all. And you can see that in the picture. It's really quite phenomenal. One way to think about this is the so-called Taylor rule. and it's there, so you can see. It's got, there's various versions of it, but this one I think is pretty clear. It's basically, if you plug in the first thing, it's a round, I don't know, oval circle. If you put in 2 for the inflation rate pi, put 0 for 0.5y, 0.2, which is pi minus 2, plus 4, you get 4%, not too far away from where they are now. If you put it a little bit higher, it's a little bit higher. So it's not too bad. Maybe 5.25, 5.5 is where it should be. I'm not really sure, but that's really the job of you central bankers to figure out. But that's the way I think about it, and whether it's overly simple or not, I don't know. Let me show you another figure, which is, I think, helpful. This is really the Fed has been recently. You can see that the interest rate has gone up, then it got way down, and it got way up again. So these are cycles which, do we really need these cycles is a question. The Fed held the interest rate lower than the Taylor rule, which is clearly there. Inflation rose sharply as the Fed then tightened policy. So the question is, do we really need to do that? Now, of course, we had the pandemic in the middle of this, so it really made it difficult to determine exactly what to do. But I think when we study policy, we need to think about this particular dip in this particular episode. So think about this. One of the things I would like to mention is we should have more discussion of this as we go. Now, this next slide is from Jim Bullard. Where's Jim? Thank you, Jim. This is a very interesting slide. This goes back to 2019, and it goes nearly to the present. The blue line is the actual policy rate the Fed has chosen. The recommended policy based on the so-called generous Taylor type rule is the dotted line, and the recommended policy is less generous is a higher line. But what is clear from this chart is how far off they were. Really, it's amazing, and I think we need to study that and understand it. Was it political pressure? Was it just mistakes? What really went on to create this discrepancy? And I think that's one of the biggest discrepancies we've seen, not in history, but over a span of time. And I think it's very important to try to understand what's going on when we look at that. Let me just mention a couple other things which I think are relevant. This is the actual inflation rate, and it has go through the second quarter of last year, 3.6%. But you can see the inflation rate got above 7.5 and then got down to 3.6, which is approximately where it is now. But you can see it's quite a bit higher than it got quite a bit higher than we wanted at the time. And the question is whether that was necessary to have. You can see there's some sense that policy led to that. It may be other things going on, maybe other things around the world were going on that created it. But I think that's really one of the issues which we need to study at this conference and other conferences like it. Let me mention one other chart, which is really the unemployment rate. It rose well above the target range. Believe it or not, that's close to 15%. It's back down to a normal range now, so it's hard to complain too much about that, that's for sure. Fed seems to be doing a good job, that's what they say. And I think that's really the golden thing about this period, which makes us think about, well, maybe they made some mistakes, but maybe they remedied it okay. Now, the last thing I want to do is really what this conference is all about, is to look at other countries. This is not all the countries in the world. This is Latin American 5, LA 5. You can see Brazil is at the top, then Colombia, then Chile, then Mexico, then Peru. But look at those numbers, 6, 8, 10%. So this is in a way where the world has been going. And I think we have, as we think about the Fed, did the Fed cause this? Was the Fed behind the curve? Was it related to this? That's a question that we should try to address. I'm not sure we are addressing it the right way or not, or we are addressing it the right way, but it seems to me that there's some issues about that. But I would say this is Latin America, Asia, is the same kind of thing. Europe's the same kind of thing. But these are data from the IMF. It says IMF, so I haven't monkeyed with the data at all. So anyway, that's the issue. Now let me just try to conclude, because I don't want to go on forever. This is the main message I have. The Fed got behind the curve, the Fed is caught up, and will other central banks be behind the curve and catch up too? So the real question is on our minds, is are we entering a new era of higher inflation? Is this the game? And I say yes, unless monetary policymakers use policy rules, as the Fed has recently started to do. And I think the goal of 2% is okay. It's not the only goal. We could 1%, 3%, but it's a goal to have. It's a round number too. It's something that Europe could follow, Japan could follow, Latin America could even follow if you like. And wouldn't it be good if we have the Fed was in the lead? Doesn't really matter if they're in the lead or not. They're not at 2% yet. But I think that's a goal to think and strive for, which we could think about as we go through and think about the analysis that we're heading. So whether we have 2%, as the Fed has, by the way, all the FOMC members have reiterated that, or we have 1 to 3%, which some people would prefer, or we have 2.2, I don't know, whatever it happens to be. I think there is some value, based on what I've said, based on the experience, based on what we've seen in the data, based on the experience of the Fed and other central banks, that would be good to focus on something like 2%. Thank you very much.